Hi, this is Dr. Kevin Connors, and we're going to present you with some information that I entitled Healing the Stomach and How the Cells Produce Hydrochloric Acid. Now, I know at the outset that that sounds extremely boring, and why in the world would I ever want to know anything about that? But trust me, it is extremely important. Matter of fact, one could argue that the problems with hydrochloric acid production and the stomach's ability to function properly could be the onset, or maybe problems with that could be the beginning of maybe most of diseases. So I'll try to make this as interesting as possible. So stay with me here. So when we talk about healing the stomach, we have to understand some anatomy, general purpose of the stomach, and the physiology of the stomach. Now this picture here, it's not the greatest picture, but it shows the esophagus coming into the stomach. And that green part that is labeled cardia is really the cardiac portion of your stomach where the diaphragm goes over the stomach. So the diaphragm, think of the diaphragm as a sheet that's laid over the stomach and separates the gut cavity from the pleural cavity where your lungs are. Now the purpose of the diaphragm is important because the diaphragm is a thin sheath of a muscle that lies over the stomach, as I said, and when the diaphragm contracts, that's how you actually take a deep breath of air. So the purpose of the diaphragm is to contract and draw air into your lungs. Now, if the esophagus is going to go through the diaphragm, there obviously needs to be a hole there, and that's called a hiatus. So the esophagus goes through this diaphragmatic hiatus and goes into that cardiac portion of the stomach. Now that hiatus, or that hole in the diaphragm, is very muscular around there. The purpose of that muscular addition to the diaphragm holds the stomach down in place. So that hiatus, that muscular ring, is called a sphincter. And we call that the cardiac sphincter of the diaphragm. So that's really important because we're going to talk about that in a little bit here. So a few things to note again is that the diaphragm covers the stomach, and the diaphragm has a hole in it called a hiatus. And the anatomy of the stomach cells, you see in that yellow piece on the picture there, those are called rugae. They have these little pits called gastric pits, and in those gastric pits are a special type of cell called the parietal cell of the stomach, and those are the cells in the stomach that make the hydrochloric acid. So, really important information. Kind of a blurry picture here, but this is the importance of the hiatus. So the hiatus, that hole in the diaphragm, that is a sphincter that holds the stomach down. You see on the left of this picture is a normal diaphragm sheathing over the stomach, the esophagus going through that hole in the diaphragm. And you see this next picture on the right is what's called a hiatal hernia. This happens a lot. If that sphincter in the stomach weakens at all, because of some reasons we're going to talk about, then my stomach can actually bulge up into that above the diaphragm. That's called a hiatal, going through the whole hernia. So the stomach is herniating through that hiatus. Multiple purposes for that. It's very common with little kids. I always tell new parents that's good to just kind of tug down on your baby's tummy all the time, because as that sphincter may not be fully developed, and that baby can have a lot of little hiatal hernias, which can cause some projectile vomiting and a lot of burping up of their food when their tummy gets all full. So pulling down on your stomach is really important. Hiatal hernias are also important as adults because they're a common, very common issue which can actually mimic cardiac problems, because that sphincter nerves that control that sphincter also go to your whole chest cavity. And many people end up in the emergency room, think they're having a heart attack when they actually just have a hiatal hernia. So, as an adult, you can tug down on that stomach, make sure you're off of that little bone that sticks out below your sternum called the xiphoid process. Slide off of that and you just pull your tummy down. I tend to personally have a lot of problems with hiatal hernia, maybe because all of the soda pop and junk food I ate as a child. but I tend to have to pull down my stomach, especially after a big meal. I just do it, honestly, subconsciously. I don't even think about it anymore. Important piece there. So the purpose of the stomach. So obviously the stomach makes hydrochloric acid. What the purpose of hydrochloric acid? It helps to digest your carbohydrates and your proteins. And most people don't realize HCl is a very important first line of your immune system, because any foodborne pathogens that go down into your gut, every time you talk, you're breathing things in. And when you're breathing things in, you swallow your saliva, and that saliva can have bacteria and virus and all sorts of things in it. Every time you eat something, you can have all sorts of pathogens in there. But if you have adequate HCl production, it doesn't get beyond there. So it's killed by your stomach acid. So if I have a decreased stomach acid, an increased pH in my stomach, well, I can end up being more prone to pathogens, to parasites, to infections, to bacteria that can cause me sicknesses and can damage my gut wall, leading to leaky gut. So this is where you can start saying HCl, yes, it's important for digestion. If I don't have proper digestion, then I can't get proper absorption and I have problems. But maybe even more importantly, HCl is your first line of defense against those foodborne pathogens. So it's going to kill parasites. So parasites that get into our body through our esophagus are killed by the HCl. Pretty important. Technical slide here. How does your body make HCl? Well, carbon dioxide from the blood goes into these parietal cells. So these parietal cells on the picture on the right, you can see are way down into those little crevices in that stomach wall. So the little crevices have these parietal cells. Carbon dioxide comes from the blood and enters into the parietal cells, making, as it mixes with water, carbonic acid. The carbonic acid then inside the parietal cells splits into hydrogen and bicarbonate, and hydrogen gets pumped inside the stomach lumen. Exchange system. There's actually a little exchange rate in the receptor membrane. Exchanges for potassium. The bicarbonate then it gets exchanged into the bloodstream for HCl, which then gets pumped into the lumen. So then in the lumen you have hydrogen and chloride, and those two combine to make HCl in your stomach. The bicarbonate then helps to buffer the blood. So important how your blood works, and we won't get into that in depth here, but your blood needs to stay buffered at a pH of about 7.35 or something like that, or you will literally die. So this is one of the pieces of the buffering system to keep the blood at a normal pH. Now, if this starts to fail, and I'm making less and less HCl for some reasons we'll discuss, I also lose some of my buffering ability. So does that mean my blood is going to become acidic? No. But it does mean that my blood will upregulate other buffering systems. And one of the other buffering systems to maintain proper pH of the blood is to take calcium out of the bone. So your bones act as a source of calcium to help buffer the blood. So a person that has long-standing decreased HCl production is also susceptible to an increase in osteoporosis over time. So there's all these systems have to work together. That's part of being a holistic organism. There's nothing that's wasted that God created. So you can see how it all fits together in a beautiful picture. So you don't have to know any of this technical stuff, but it's important to know that HCl is produced in the parietal cells, and it also helps buffer your blood. So what does it do? Well, it helps digest your foods. It helps kill pathogens. You can just remember those two pieces. It's very important. The other issue with HCl, if you don't get food digested, it sits in your stomach longer and becomes a bolus of food in your stomach, and that becomes issues as well. That's really the biggest reason why a person gets reflux is that you get this bolus of food sitting in your stomach, and a little bit of HCl that you do have produced gets kind of pushed up into that fundus of the stomach and can easily belch up into the esophagus, causing all sorts of problems. So again, a decreased hydrochloric acid production, just what I said, food sits in the stomach lumen longer than it's supposed to. You can end up getting reflux of the little bit of hydrochloric acid you do have up into the esophagus, causing irritations. Food also just gets partially digested because hydrochloric acid is a big piece of that digestive process that breaks down proteins and carbohydrates. And if it only gets partially digested, it ends up finally getting shunted into the duodenum, that first part of the small intestine only partially digested, and can be a big contributor, just irritating, just literally physically irritating the gut, causing leaky gut issues. We'll talk more about that when we talk about gluten and other proteins that you can become sensitive to. The big reason that we do is because they don't get properly digested and fully into amino acids, and go into the gut as peptide pieces that become very strong irritants of the gut membrane. And of course, we talked about you lose that blood buffering system. What do you do about it? So there's some solutions. I put most of our patients on a digestive enzyme that has HCl in it. Now, I don't believe that's a complete solution. Okay, you don't just, okay, here's the problem. So this is really a medical solution. We're going to fix the problem by adding HCl. It's a decreased HCl, or a hypochlorhydria. So we're going to add HCl, but we didn't fix the reason why. So we want to address that as well. But you have to start this way because you have to take some pressure off the stomach cells so that they can start producing the HCl in that mechanism we talked about on a few slides back. But you have to give them a little break. So you have to take some sort of digestive enzyme with HCl. Now, these are two products that we currently use in our office, and I'm not against using other products as well. There's a lot of good products out there. You can find these in our store if you so desire. We always start out just by taking one per meal. Now, when you're substituting a supplement for your lack of HCl and digestive enzyme need, you take them with your food. So you wouldn't take this on an empty stomach. You don't have any food in there to digest. So you want to take them when you eat. So I always tell patients that, oh my gosh, I forgot to take my HCl, my Zypan, or my Digestimes, and it's now an hour after I ate. Well, you missed the window. Maybe give yourself a half-hour window after you eat. Before, during, or after you eat. I always think it's a little bit better before. But if you miss the window a half hour after you eat, well, you missed it. Next time you eat, take some. So how many should I take? That's something you have to kind of test out. Everybody's a little different. For myself, if I know I eat a big turkey dinner or something like that, I may take 3 to 6 Zypan. I just need to help digesting this. Now, I have a notorious issue with my stomach that goes long back because of my diet growing up, but you probably do too. So you have to kind of play with the dosage to see how your symptoms are. If you have reflux and that's your major issue, and your major symptoms are reflux and heartburn, it could take a long time to heal. So you got to give yourself a month or two of playing with the dosage and upping the dosage when you're eating. Now, you can never technically really hurt yourself by taking supplements like this unless you take them on an empty stomach and you take a lot of them. You're just going to get a stomach ache. That's all you're going to get. So your stomach's going to really hurt. How you fix that is just by putting something in your stomach like food, and it'll solve the problem. And don't do that again. So there isn't any dangers. There's no side effects. There's no negative feedback loops for HCl. So the fear of, if I start taking HCl, then my stomach will decrease production of HCl. It doesn't work that way. So that's why I wanted to show you that technical slide of how HCl is produced. There's no negative feedback loop, meaning that if you have too much HCl production, your body shuts it down. That's the misnomer on the ridiculousness of using Tums and acid blockers like Prilosec, is that you are shutting off HCl productions in the misnomer of, oh, I have reflux, so I must have too much acid. That is completely wrong. There's no science that shows that. All the science shows exactly what I'm telling you, but there's no drug that they make $60 billion a year, or whatever they make on, that they're going to keep you in the dark for. So number one, you substitute some HCl and enzymes. Number two, you have to get to the cause. So you always got to ask the question, what? Why? So identify what initially caused the decreased production. GMO foods, a big cause of decreased HCl production. Artificial colorings, flavorings, additives, MSG, fluoride, chlorine, huge blockages that block the production of HCl. I'm not going to get into the biochemistry of fluoride and chlorine, but they're huge in this. So you have to address those situations, and that's not what this slide presentation is about. We'll talk about that more in this entire program. But you want to look at that. You want to look at different chemicals and the effects that that has on your biochemistry of the stomach. You also want to change your diet. So going to a whole food diet is super important, and I refer you to our My Eden and My Covenant diet and our My Whole Food diet that describes this in detail. And changing your diet is all important. So people that want to come to us and say, I really want to get healthy, but don't change anything I do, it's time just to say goodbye, because that's never going to happen. You keep doing the same thing and you're going to get the same results, kind of thing. So in summary, we just want to stop taking acid blockers. We want to solve that problem. And this is not just an issue with people that have a lot of reflux and are taking Tums and things like that. This is an issue with people that have leaky gut, any autoimmune issues. Well, how do I know I have leaky gut? Well, there's a whole presentation on that as we go, so hold on. But any autoimmune issues, any chronic issues, any chronic fatigue, any disease process at all, like I said in the beginning, this can start with the stomach. So it would be safe to say that probably every human being would benefit by taking an HCl and a digestive enzyme to start in their healing process. Now, don't get me wrong. You don't need to take that the rest of your life. Currently, I take Zypan and Digestimes, but I literally only take them maybe 4 or 5 days a month at this point in my life. When I eat a big meal, if I feel like my food isn't being digested real well, something for some reason is just kind of sitting there, I'll take some Zypan or Digestimes. So that is a product, HCl and a digestive enzyme, that you really want to have in your nutrition chest or your vitamin chest or medicine chest in your house that you could use on a regular basis. I would not suggest you use it on little children, because if the product has HCl in it, you can't chew it because it's going to affect your teeth. So it's something you have to swallow. So there really isn't a substitute that I know of that you could use for little kids. You can use just straight digestive enzymes, which will help at least digest the food, that bolus when it's in the small intestine, but it's not going to solve the stomach issue. Just going to the next steps and changing their diet is the way to go. Okay, we got a lot more to go over in our other presentations, so stay tuned and we'll get into leaky gut and all the things that decreased stomach acid can cause. Great, I hope you learned a lot.